out on the edge of Rouse Hill, Kellyville Ridge, and then over that hill that you're looking at is the ponds in northwestern Sydney. And this is the location of Vinegar Hill. So you've got Vinegar Hill Road is actually marked out here. It's the road leading to Vinegar Hill. Heathfield Street is the one that actually goes up parallel to Vinegar Hill itself. But this is the south side of Castlebrook Cemetery. There was fencing here previously, but it's fallen away. So you can actually enter from this side now without jumping the fence. I just want to show you the area. That's the battlefield side of Vinegar Hill, where the convicts and the redcoats finally came to clash. So the memorial's up over the hill, up that way. So if you ever come out to Castlebrook Cemetery, the Vinegar Hill Memorial is, I can just see it through there. I'll put my finger into shot, try not to make it blur. It's just in that area, just there on top of that hill. But in the first-hand accounts, what you get is the rebellion taking place, or rebellion is probably too strong a word, but the revolt over at Castle Hill at the prison farm. So that occurs, and Castle Hill is over in that direction past those trees, probably about 10 or 12 k's from here. So the revolt happens. The British head back down to what's now Circular Quay, so to the centre of the colony, and get reinforcements, and then they come up and end up in Parramatta, because what they're trying to do essentially is figure out, okay, where have the convicts gone? And the concern was that the convicts could have been as few as 300 or so, but may have been able to amass 1,500 or 2,000. I think some of the contemporary accounts indicate. So you end up with this kind of crazy pursuit, really, where the redcoats have taken off into the night, raised the alarm, then headed back, come back a different way to which they probably went down. I suspect they probably went across the river at some point, the Parramatta River, on the way down, but I think they might have come back and stayed south of the river for the most part. Got to Parramatta, then come across, and then went to Toongabbie, what's now Constitution Hill, looking for the rebels and trying to figure out, all right, where are these guys? Now, what's interesting, as I walk down this hill, this is getting really, really boggy underfoot. And that plays a part into this as well. So the redcoats were heading up Windsor Road and trying to figure out, okay, where are these guys? And in one of the accounts, it mentions in a letter that they were coming up the road, they'd passed Windsor Road, or the other intersection of Windsor Road, so we know that they've gone past the point, which is just down to the right from where I am, so just down that way. And that as they were coming up, they mounted a slight rise, which I'll zoom in. That rise, I am pretty sure, is where those houses are located now, and there's a road parallel to that which runs that way. And it says that as they came over the rise, they then came into sight of the convicts, which pretty much puts them down in this location here somewhere. Now, what's really, really interesting, and that's why it's so cool to come out and walk the ground, is that for some reason there's this conjecture about where the battle was. Now, there was a lot of farmland already out here in 1804, so I strongly suspect a lot of this land was probably cleared. There's one picture which may or may not have been done at the time. I suspect it was pretty close, because the trees that you see in the background of that painting or picture actually look a lot like these trees here over to the left. So the ones running parallel to Heathfield Street. And I think what's happened is, when the British come in, this is pretty much their view. So I suspect the convicts are then up on this hill. And I think the only real question is whether the British went straight up over the hill, or if it was somewhat of a diagonal pursuit, in comparison to where the roads are now. And that's Windsor Road down there now, where you can see all the trucks and cars, so just if you want to get your bearings. But my gut feeling is that I suspect it was pretty straight, just as is depicted in the artwork, and that the British have formed up somewhere in this area. There is like a slight rise here, so they could have formed up just behind that for a bit of cover, but I suspect by the time they came up this rise just here, this is probably where the parley happened between their officer and the leader of the rebels, somewhere in this area. And then I think the shooting must have happened up here. And what's interesting is that this is a very sort of boggy, waterlogged area. There's a small lake down there, which is probably somewhat man-made, but in saying that, this whole area is really boggy and never seems to properly dry out as well. And that played into the situation too, sort of where they couldn't go. But I think they must have come straight up this route here. The firing would have happened in here, the volley fire. And yeah, the convicts, it would have been a matter of either surrender, give up here, because there weren't that many killed in the actual battle. The number is around about the 20 mark, but that's including the incident, the fighting that happens during the day, which is probably fairly short-lived. I think it was between about 11 and 12 o'clock. And then there's a pursuit that happens later, which stretches from this point all the way down to Second Ponds Creek. So you probably can't tell with the camera, but I'm slowly walking up the hill, up Vinegar Hill in Castlebrook Cemetery. So if you ever do see that famous painting of the battle, essentially you're looking at that. That's the far background of that. It's that view there, and you've still got some of the trees, particularly those ones up there, which are really, really close to what you see in the painting itself. But everything else being cleared, which actually squares with what's in the painting as well. But yeah, you come up this hill, so I would love to know. Now, there's not been any graves for the cemetery put in this area, but I can't help but note that is slowly starting to encroach. We've got headstones up there, but there's this part of me that would love to know, if you ran a metal detector over this area in particular that I'm walking on now, what your chances of finding musket balls would be, because they should be in a reasonable concentration in a few places. Just to once and for all put that question to bed of, okay, so where'd the battle actually occur? Was somewhere in this area, but I think it could still be pinned down. And I dare say, as the cemetery expands, that some of the grave diggers here are probably going to answer that question by default. But I just think it would be great from an archaeological perspective, an Australian history perspective, to answer that question in a bit more of a methodical way, just because it's the only pitched battle. And I know some people talk about it more as not even qualifying as that, but at that argument aside, Vinegar Hill in 1804 is the only battle that has actually occurred on Australian soil. Hopefully it's the last one as well. So it does hold a kind of unique and odd historical place in our history. And I know I've always wondered as well that as you walk up the hill, obviously it starts to dry out and get firmer underfoot too. Isn't that some of these locations, not just if you ran a metal detector over the ground, but if you ran a metal detector up a tree trunk like this, you're going to find a small ball of lead embedded in there somewhere. Who knows? That's the beauty of history. But that's that tree line that I mentioned before, so I think it's a little bit more obvious when you're up here, and I think that really does equate with what you see in the contemporary picture, the contemporary artwork on the Battle of Vinegar Hill. So just going to move up, and all I want to do today is just get to the top of this hill. So according to that artwork, really what we see now, this big grassy open field, is actually from all that account, not too different to what I'm walking on now. So just swinging around, depending how far up the hill the convicts were, that might have been the view they woke up to in the morning, and the view where they went, uh-oh, I think this is up. And it was really not so much bad leadership, just a lack of leadership, which did their cause in. You know, death or liberty and a ship to take us home. Well, that's all good in theory, but you need a plan in place well before you get to that point. So getting up to the top of the hill now, still probably another 100 meters or so before I'd say that I've reached the actual ridge line. This area up here tends to be this kind of disused and overgrown area. It's been like this as long as I've known it, so I don't know what the rationale is for that, but this one particular zone of the cemetery has always been overgrown. Interesting. I don't know if there is something historical there and it's been left like that to protect it. I don't know why it's been zoned out the way that it has. There are the occasional sort of very old tree stumps in this area, but yeah, it's kind of odd. A couple of older trees up here, so that's looking through this wooded area, but it's very sparse now. So that road that you can just see with the houses, that's Heathfield Street, and it's a fairly sort of short, sharp climb if you just go up the road, so it's a little bit more gentle when you walk up through the cemetery. And yeah, essentially you get to the top of the hill if you're ever wanting to come out and walk the battlefield and you know, get down on the ground and make sense of Vinegar Hill and where that famous incident occurred here in Australia. This is, I think, the top end of it, so we've just flattened out as we get to the housing. There's another gap in the fence line here, and yeah, it's just something really, really interesting, and that just, I don't know, everyone, each of their own, but I think it probably deserves a little bit more attention before it inevitably probably just gets built over. I dare say, with the cemetery's growth in years to come, but yeah, it'd be nice to investigate it a little bit more thoroughly before time marches on and we lose the opportunity to do that. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. Any questions, comments, anything you want me to take a more specific look at, particularly out here in the future, just let me know in the comments. Bye for now.